Welcome back to another episode of Hot Mess Espresso, guys. We have Karen Iverson on the podcast today. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me, Heather.
Yeah, so you have a whole career on a lot of different things. And then, so your writing journey was one that really kind of like jumped out to me. So, what got you into writing? Like, what made you decide to even write your first book? All of that.
I always wanted to write since I was a little girl.
Hmm.
You could have found me in my bedroom, sitting on my bed, writing out poems or writing out songs, writing short stories. It was about when I was 9 to 10 years old that I first was writing my first little book, in school.
Hmm.
And at that time, we were all talking about the Smurfs. I don't know if you remember the Smurfs, but
Oh yeah, love the Smurfs.
yeah, yeah. So that was the first time I ever was really trying to write a book, but of course I didn't publish it at that time.
Right.
And then I published, or I didn't publish, well, I published poetry in high school in a literary magazine that we had at my school. And when I went to college, I then took writing classes so that I could write myself out of my science classes. I was studying science because I thought I wanted to go to medical school. And the thing was, yeah, it was this dream that I wanted because of my father. My father had died when I was young and he had been a doctor, so I wanted to be a doctor like him.
Hmm.
And so in college, I picked that as a major just so that I could be like him and realized I was so miserable, I needed to escape. So I used my writing to escape out of it.
Right.
And then as an adult, it was mostly when I was going through breast cancer that I started writing my first book. And what happened was I would write about every single event that was occurring in the whole breast cancer journey. And it was really started as a journal. But the thing
Hmm.
was, I realized one day I was editing my journals. So I was writing them on paper with a pen, and I would go back and cross things out and make lines here and scribbles there and arrows here. And all of a sudden I realized I'm writing my first book. So it took several years after I was through the breast cancer that I ended up actually getting to the point where I was ready to start really pursuing publishing it. And I didn't have the confidence that if I sent it to a publisher, it would get published. And it
Mm.
wasn't that, yeah, it wasn't that I didn't think it was good enough. It was just that I had this picture in my mind of publishers with stacks of books on their desk that they never read. So I decided to go the self-publishing route.
That makes
And
sense.
yeah. And so I ended up getting hooked up with a company called the Self Publishing School at the time. It's now called selfpublishing.com, and learned how to self publish my book. And so then I did self publish my first book, which was Winning the Breast Cancer Battle, Empowering Warriors, and Guiding Loved Ones.
Yeah, that's amazing. How was your mental health with battling cancer and you're in remission? Is that the term?
Yep, remission. Yeah.
How was that
So
journey?
it was difficult, not to lie about it, obviously.
Hmm.
You never really imagine you're going to get cancer. And when I was basically in the shower when I found the lump, and I found it, and it was really because one of my closest friends had just been diagnosed with heart disease and she had to have a pacemaker put in. And I had this sign in my bathroom. You know how like some hotels have little signs on the doors?
Hmm.
And I had one of those hanging in my shower, and it had little punch out buttons for each month, and you were supposed to be doing your monthly breast exam, and I never did them. And so after Daniela was diagnosed and got her pacemaker, I saw it in the shower. I'm like, I probably should check. And it wasn't, a month later that I found the lump. That was pretty scary. And at the time I was in school, so I wasn't working. I didn't have any income. So it was, a financial journey and burden as well as just a cancer
Yeah.
journey and burden. And my dad actually had died of cancer. So that's what, I was thinking, oh my gosh, maybe I'm going to die. And,
Right.
it was test after test after test for me. So we really, my whole family and my friends supported me. And, every week it's like the journey got more and more complex. And then I ended up having a single mastectomy in November of 2012. And then in December, they decided that they didn't have clear margins. and they put these little markers in your breast to mark where the tumor is. And one of the little clips was lost. So
Oh
yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah, it was lost. So they're like, we have to go back in and do another surgery because we don't know if we got all of the tumor. So
Jeez.
so then on Valentine's Day of 2013, I had another surgery. And I was like, on Valentine's Day, I'm having another surgery, you know? But, you know, it saved my life. And then after that, I had to have chemo. And my surgeon had told me I wasn't going to need chemo. But then when I went and met with the oncologist, she was like, yeah, you need it right away because of various factors, you know,
Hmm.
including that I was so young when it happened, and the fact that the tumor was a larger tumor. So I ended up having chemo. And in chemo, I went from over 100 pounds to 94 pounds, and I just couldn't eat or do anything. I couldn't keep anything down.
Right.
I was just so nauseous all the time. But by the time I was getting through the end of chemo, there was this tennis group through the hospital that I was going to called Tennis for Life. And they
Hmm.
had tennis for anybody that was impacted by breast cancer, and it was free. And we had lessons with coaches, and we would have a group meeting afterwards and talk about, you know, all things breast cancer and cancer in general. And so that was a perk of it, you know. And after that, I went through reconstructive surgery, and didn't realize at the time that I was so thin from losing all that weight that my body was going to renormalize to a normal weight. And I had an implant put in. So now the implant is smaller than my other breast because, you know, I gained weight and the implant didn't grow.
Yeah, I will say, whether you gain weight or lose weight, the first thing to change is the girls. It's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
irritating.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
goodness. Well,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you beat it. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that you haven't had any scares since then, right?
Well, I did have one scare. I had,
Oh no.
it turned out I had a tail gut cyst, which I basically started having pain at the bottom of my spine. And they did an MRI and found out that I had something there, some mass. And I had to go meet with the surgeon. And he's like, well, I think I know what it is, but it needs to be removed. And we don't know until we actually take it out. So, of course, I was worried that it was some other form of
Right.
cancer, but it
Yeah.
wasn't, thank God. So, yeah.
That's all terrifying. How did you kind of keep yourself afloat through all of that? Because that whole thing is a whole process.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, it really was the journaling that got me through it all because I would just journal and just think through my thoughts and process them. And then I would talk with my family and my close friends. I had a few close, really good friends who helped support me through it. And, you know, just, you know, day by day, going one day by one day. And, you know, there were times where I thought, well, what if I die? But then at the same time, I also felt like I was going to make it and I wasn't going to die. So, I kind of felt like I didn't really ever think I was going to die because I just felt like I was going to make it. So, you know, partially it's positive attitude.
Right. No, that makes so much sense. I feel like our thoughts can manifest a lot more than we realize. And obviously, like sometimes you can't manifest your way into most things, but it does help every now and then.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then I had faith too, so you know that my faith helped me through it as well.
Oh, for sure. For sure. So you also had a little bit of an acting career. You've just
Mhm.
kind of done a little bit of everything. So
Yeah.
we had chatted. Why didn't you decide to pursue that more full time?
You know, partially it was the mental health, you know, and
Hmm.
just, you know, going to auditions and, you know, getting, you know, not necessarily rejections, but just not ever hearing back anything, you know, which became a rejection or becomes a rejection in your mind,
Yeah.
you know, because you're not hired. And the thing is that you can be the best actress or actor in the world. And if you're not what they're looking for as far as looks, you know, or tone of voice or whatnot, then you know, they might not hire you. And so they're really looking for a specific type. And if you don't fit that specific type, then you're not going to get it. So,
Right.
you know, it was difficult. And I decided that you know, there were other things I could do and enjoy just as much
Hmm.
rather than having to suffer through all these auditions that just didn't go anywhere.
Yeah, it's got to be exhausting. I have a couple friends that are in acting, and I mean, they're like, you hear a thousand no's before you finally get your yes. And sometimes it's just you're not, if it's not like a top priority, like this is all I want to do with my yeah, it could be I know I wouldn't be able to hear that many no's in a row. But
Yeah.
speaking of yeses you did get, you got the Difference Maker Award. What
Yes.
is that for people that don't know, and how did you achieve that? Because that's a big deal.
Yeah, so that was actually the first writing official conference I went to, and it was with the self-publishing school at the time.
Hmm.
And I had been working with a coach who apparently nominated me for the award. And the thing was that I had been, really just focusing on getting my book published and not about where my future was going, but my coach really saw this bright light in me and this potential future that I had. And he really felt that my writing was going to help get me there and creating this first book of mine. And so at the conference, they announced that they were going to be giving out awards. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, this is cool. They're going to announce awards. And for some reason, I felt this like, okay, well, fix your shirt. And so I'm like, readjusting my shirt or whatnot. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, they call my name. And I'm like, what? And I was the first award they ever gave to anybody. So it was a
Oh,
real big, yeah, it was a real big honor. And they announced it's just the Difference Maker Award. And I, went up to Sean, who was the one who announced the award afterwards from the company. And I said, you have no idea how much this means to me because, not only does it, say that I'm a good writer and that I have a positive future, most likely and hopefully. But at the time, I was going to a church and my pastor had literally just talked about becoming a difference maker. And he had never spoken about that before. So
yeah.
it was like, yeah, that was amazing. And so I told Sean this, and Sean says to me, he goes, Karen, he goes, we just changed the name of the award a week ago. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was, I mean, it was just amazing, and just to think about it now and just the fact that they saw that potential in me and enough out of all of their other students or all the other people that they were working with to give it to me was just like just humbling beyond belief. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That is, it sounds like you were meant to get that award, especially with like the name change. And that's too many signs. That is what is meant for you will happen kind of thing.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I've been working on it. Now I have 3 books, so that's exciting. And
Yeah.
you know, yeah. So
Yeah, because
I've been
you just
working
had a
on it.
new book come out. You just had a new book come out in October, right?
Yes, yes. So that was called Winning the Mental Health Battle from Struggling to
Hmm.
Thriving, 7 Tips to Navigate Anxiety, Depression, and Mania. And it was just published this October. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What was it like writing that, especially because obviously with that being a book that talks about those topics, you really have to kind of dive deep into yourself to write that. But what was that writing process like? Was it exhausting? Was it fulfilling? Like both?
Honestly, it had been a long time coming to write that book. I knew that I really needed to write that book, but I was afraid to write it for a long time. And then
Hmm.
I ended up literally just sitting down one weekend when I was stuck in a hotel room and I started writing it and wrote most of the book over the course of about 3 days. And, of course, then after that, over the next year or so, I changed things and edited it and got it professionally edited and formatted and made some changes to it. But it was exhausting writing it because it was a lot of it is stories about my personal experience. And then the rest
Hmm.
of it is a combination with what I've learned becoming a licensed professional counselor. So it has both the tip sections in it as well as the stories sections. And I really just had to dig deep, yeah, and be willing to be vulnerable and express, this is how I feel and this is what I went through and this is related to depression or this is related to anxiety, and how you can see that in a person by looking at my story. And if you are
Right.
a person suffering from those things, you can see it so that you can empathize or you can understand that other people are going through similar things to you or the same things as you are. So,
Right. So, not to like give too much of the book away, because obviously we want people to read it, but
mhm.
what was one of your favorite tips that you'd put in there out of the seven?
Of course, I have the journaling in there. And when I talk about journaling, I talk about every different aspect of journaling because it's not just
Hmm.
writing with a pencil or a paper or typing in your phone or texting, yourself.
Hmm.
Journaling can be anything from like dancing what you're feeling to, acting out what you're feeling to making a voice recording of what you're feeling. So I really see all of those aspects as journaling. And, it's really a form of expressive creativity and just sharing with yourself or with somebody else how you're feeling and what you're going through. So I really love journaling as a source of a tip to use to get through anything because I really feel like you're thinking through what you're going through.
Hmm.
And when you're journaling it, you're processing it. So it's helping you make decisions. It's helping you, just get out in the open what is deep within you and you're concerned about or you're afraid of or you need help with. So I guess I would
Right.
say journaling, probably.
I never once thought of journaling as being like acting out or dancing or anything like that. I know dancing's like an expression, but for those that don't like to just sit down and write, I never thought of that. Like, I guess maybe my version of journaling is going to live shows because that's where I feel like I leave it all in the venue and call it a day because I just don't have the energy to like sit down and write things out anymore. I need to start.
Hmm.
But,
Yeah.
I never thought of it being more of a creative thing versus like a literal like pen to paper. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Where can we find these books?
So they're all on Amazon. And there's also a link that you can go to, which is KarenEiverson.com/mental health. And
Hmm.
when you go to that link, you can find 3 quizzes. So there's a quiz for anxiety, there's a quiz for depression, and there's a quiz for mania. And you also can get access to 2 visualizations to help you, move through the process that you're dealing with.
No, I love that. You sent me the quizzes and I've yet to take them, but I will be taking them tonight because I actually have some time to myself. So I'm very excited to take those. And yeah, we will have the download link in the episode description and all of that. But I love everything that you're doing right now. Now, your 3 books, what exactly are they called? Because we kind of went over it, but what are each of them? Because we didn't go over the
Yes.
middle one like at all.
Yes. So the first book, as I mentioned, is Winning the Breast Cancer Battle,
Hmm.
empowering and guiding warriors, empowering loved ones and guiding warriors. And that
Hmm.
one is really for the loved ones. It's the first book, so it tells the whole story, but it's really geared towards the loved ones and it has the tip sections in it as well as the story. It's written in a journal format. And then the second book is Winning the Breast Cancer Battle, Empowering and Guiding Breast Cancer Warriors. And that one is really specifically for the person going through breast cancer so that they
Hmm.
can, it has note sections to take notes in it. It has questions to ask doctors in it, questions to ask nutritionists. There's a calendar in there to fill in important dates and resources. So that one is really for the person going through the cancer. And I've also been told by people that have cancers other than breast cancer that these books are really applicable to them as well. Because when you go through cancer, you go through a lot of the same types of things.
Yep.
And then the third book is Winning the Mental Health Battle from Struggling to Thriving. 7 tips to navigate anxiety, depression, and mania. And that does have the 7 tips in it, as well as the story of what I've been through as far as my experiences with those mental aspects of illness, So it's really to help people going through those type of illnesses themselves and also for people that want to understand what it's like for somebody going through those type of things. So you don't have to be somebody suffering from anxiety, depression, or mania to read it and get benefits from it. And it also uses not only my personal experiences, but my knowledge as a licensed professional counselor in the tip sections and as well.
Yeah. like you've mentioned being a counselor a couple of times. I don't think that came up in our other call, but what made you decide to get into counseling?
hmm So that actually started again with my father being a doctor. He was a psychiatrist. That was the kind of doctor he was.
Got it.
And I always wanted to be a psychiatrist like him. But then, as I mentioned, when I went to medical school, I'm not medical school, when I went to college in preparation to go to
Right.
medical school, I just found it was so difficult that I decided that I didn't want to go to medical school. And so yeah. So
It's
for years, go ahead. Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with you. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, so for years I just did job to job to job and like roamed around, and I did my acting as well and just kept
Hmm.
trying to figure out where I could possibly fit in. And then finally I worked with a coach, a career counselor, and did some inventory tests and did some research and found out that, it would be great for me to become a therapist. And
Hmm.
so I started thinking about, well, I could become an art therapist or I could become a licensed professional counselor. And I, decided that I was going to pursue it and get my LPC status and be able to do psychiatry, but not prescribe medications. So that's how I
Right.
feel it is. I really do
Yeah.
the therapy with the clients, and then the doctor prescribes the medications if they need them.
Yeah. That's amazing. Karen, so much. Wow, so much. Thank you so much. It has been a day. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been absolutely wonderful. And yeah, we will. It's just me. I'll have all of the links for the quizzes and everything else in the episode description. And then if you go on my Instagram when this episode drops, I will be posting what my results are for each of these quizzes. So, we're holding everyone accountable. I will be taking them. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed meeting with you and working with you.
Same, same.